actually make the Zoom meeting big. Are you ready? Are you feeling gorgeous?
I'm feeling gorgeous. Glad to see your face. I'm glad to be talking about music, so I'm in my happy place.
Hi, I'm Patricia. Welcome to the 115th episode of A Breath of Song. I'm so glad you chose to do this today, which is extra special because Pam Blevins Hinkle is joining us for a songwriter conversation. Hi, Pam. Welcome.
Hello. I'm so happy to be here.
We are here to find more ways of singing songs that help us heal, adapt, grow. Your voice is exactly what's needed for this, and that was you as in the listener. All of our voices will show up as they are today. I'm coming to you straight from my home in what is now called Burlington, Vermont, on the unceded lands of the Abenaki people. And Pam, tell us where you're calling from.
I am calling from the land known as Indianapolis, Indiana, which was violently and unjustly taken from the Miami and the Kickapoo and the Shawnee and the Delaware.
Here we are, feeling the connection to our breath, vibration in our body. Let's find how good it can feel to sing. Last week I shared Pam's song, All Motion is Love. You can always click back and listen to that if you missed it. Today, Pam will be teaching us a relatively new song of hers called Reciprocity. We'll learn it slowly so it can settle inside you. You can begin to trust it as a resource. Let it move you into a state of flow. Then we get to have a conversation with Pam, and we'll sing the song again at the end to close out the episode. You'll always be able to find this with full show notes and artwork on the website, abreathofsong.com. Let's start with a yawn stretch. Oh, arcing over to one side and then the other. Starting to yawn. Oh, rolling your shoulders back, moving your neck, whatever your body needs to open up a little more space in your joints, a little more space between your bones. Let your ligaments slide a little more easily. And starting to pay attention to the breath as it comes in and out. Notice your ribs can widen and release. And your belly can widen, your back stretch, and release your jaw. And open into your pelvis, widen your hips, down to your toes, and release up through your spine, out your skull, and letting the air just drop in, and letting it siren out, and again drop in, one more time, drop, sing back to me. Yow, yow, yow.
Yow, yow, yow.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Whoa.
Whoa.
All right. I'm going to turn it over to you, Pam, to share Reciprocity, please.
This is a song about our relationship with trees, what we can learn from them. I breathe for the trees, and they breathe for me. I breathe for the trees, and they breathe for me. I breathe for the trees, and they breathe for me. I breathe for the trees, and they breathe for me. And that's the first part. I breathe for the trees, and they breathe for me. I breathe for the trees, and they breathe for me. I breathe for the trees, and they breathe for me. I breathe for the trees, and they breathe for me. Second part. You and me and the tree, living in reciprocity. You and me and the tree, living in reciprocity. You and me Reciprocity, third part. Rooted in the moment and reaching for each other. Rooted in the moment and reaching for the dream. Rooted in the moment and reaching for each other. Rooted in the moment and reaching for the dream. Rooted in the moment and reaching for each other. Rooted in the moment and reaching for the dream. And so those are the three parts of the song. And now let's hear it all together. And I really find that I have to have my body going when I'm singing it, right? Singing is like a whole body experience, and I really like to feel my leaves blowing in the wind and my trunk being grounded and rooted as I sing the song. I breathe for the trees and they breathe for me. I breathe for the trees and they breathe for me. I breathe for the trees and they breathe for me. I breathe for the trees and they breathe for me. I breathe for the trees and they breathe for me. I breathe for the trees and they breathe for me. I breathe for the trees and they breathe for me. I breathe for the trees and they breathe for me. I breathe for the trees and they breathe for each other. I breathe for the trees and they breathe for me. I breathe for the trees and they breathe for each other. I breathe for the trees and they breathe for me. I breathe for the trees and they breathe for each other. I breathe for the trees and they breathe for me. I breathe for the trees and they breathe for each other. I breathe for the trees and they breathe for me. I breathe for the trees and they breathe for each other. I breathe for the trees and they breathe for me. I breathe for the trees and they breathe for each other. I breathe for the trees and they breathe for me. I breathe for the trees and they breathe for each other. I breathe for the trees and they breathe for me. I breathe for the trees and they breathe for each other. I breathe for the trees and they breathe for me. I breathe in the moment and reaching for each other. Rooted in the moment and reaching for the dream. Rooted in the moment and reaching for each other. Rooted in the moment and reaching for the dream. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out.
Yummy. Yeah, tell us the story behind it.
So I wrote that song about a year ago. During the pandemic, my husband and I took lots of walks like lights of people to get out of our house, and we used it as an opportunity to go exploring the parks in our city. And there's a park not far from us called Riverside Adventure Park. And it's a park that's a reclaimed golf course. Mm. And it's just happened very recently that they've turned this golf course into a park, and there's some public art, and it's nice for walking. But every time we walk there, I have this this feeling. And you know how golf courses are. The trees are few and far between, and they're spaced way apart. And so there was just a lonely energy in this park from those trees, and a sadness and a heaviness. And I kept thinking about how many years of pesticides have been put into the ground, and I've read a lot of, and trees I just adore trees, and so I know that they're communal creatures, and they don't want to stand alone, and so I was walking in the park and just feeling like a lot of gratitude, and thinking about how these trees need us, and we need them. And so I just started singing, and they make our air. We make what they need to survive, and we need each other. And so this line of "I breathe for the trees and they breathe for me" just came to me while I was walking, and as did the second line of that song. And I was walking with my husband, and I think he might have been slightly annoyed because I wasn't really paying attention to him. But because the songs, they take you when they take you. You drop in or drop from the river of song, right, in a moment, and you don't know that it's coming, and then it sort of takes you over. And so it was really my gift to the trees, when I wrote it, is that I'm here for you, you're here for me. I will come here and walk and breathe with you. And as the golf course slowly reclaims itself, right, back to a park. And I don't know what their plan is for more trees, or if it's just going to happen and go wild, or what that's going to be. Trees are very sacred to me, and they have been since I was a little girl, climbing them, and I love them. And then that last line of the song came to me later, rooted in the moment and reaching for each other, right? I love this about trees. They're tall and sturdy, and they sway, and there's so much movement in them and sound in them. And then they have these roots that go down, and don't just go down, but spread sideways and feed, and are part of that mycelial network and connected to everything. And we need to do that, right? We need to often reach down and feel how we're connected, and also feel the movement that's alive in us. And so this rooted in the moment and being present and reaching for each other, right? Reaching for each other. We're not standing alone. And rooted in the moment and reaching for the dream, right? That again, it's this forward. It was important for me to think about, what's the forward piece of this? I'm not just standing still. We have this idea sometimes of trees as just standing still, and they're not. And neither are we. And that rhythmic element really kind of brought the song together in a beautiful way.
So I'm curious. So I was just learning it as you were singing it. I haven't sung this before at all, haven't heard it. And I'm curious, what do you say to people, when you're learning a 3-part song for the first time? What are your suggestions to people as they learn a song? Do you suggest that they learn every part and try to sing every part in rotation? Do you suggest that they find the part that speaks to them and settle on that part? Or how do you suggest people remember these parts or find their way in a song like that?
I always tell people to find their own way, and just let the pieces and the parts call to them. In the group I run, Song Squad, we have almost no rules, right? But the one rule we have, or we shouldn't call it a rule, with a guideline we have, is that you can sing whatever you want to wherever you are. So if you're standing and singing a certain part and you're like, I think I really like what I'm hearing on the other side of the room, I could just walk over there and do that. And sometimes with those kinds of songs too, a single note, if you hold a single note, the drone that's with that, or just 2 notes, that's the part you have to offer, right? And a lot of times the songs that I'm creating are you might have noticed the first 2 parts were short, but the third part, the rooted, is longer. It's twice as long as the phrase, right? And so it gives people options too, right? I can live into the longer phrase, or I can just sing, I breathe for the trees and they breathe for me, right? Or just, I breathe, I breathe, I breathe, I breathe, right? So people can find their way in, and I'm really very intentional in my songwriting about making space for all voices and all abilities, and people get very excited, though, when they hear how we can stack together with our differences. to create something really satisfying and beautiful in the moment and connected, right? And we do a lot of repetition in the group. I find I'm a classically trained musician, so drilling is part of my discipline, but just also what that repetition does to our bodies and our cells, and we just stay with that. When I'm teaching that to a group of people, we will stay with a single part until it really feels like a one voice singing, right? And you could see it in people's faces, and you could see it in their bodies, right? That they've rooted down into whatever that is. And then we move on. And generally, I teach everybody all three parts, right? And then it's like, okay, who wants to sing what? And then sometimes some people don't want to sing one of the parts. And then that's fine, too. And that's what the song is in that moment, right? Yeah. And people have great things to offer that I didn't think of. I've had, like, new parts added to songs by people. And I'm like, that's what that was missing. Or... another song that I wrote, I couldn't quite think of the fourth part. I'd written 3 parts, and I had it in my head for months, and I'm like, it's not coming. The fourth part isn't coming. And then I'm like, I'm just going to teach the 3 parts. And what was missing was the improvisation. And the group went crazy with it. I didn't ask them to improv. It just happened. And so much of singing about me is like letting us be fully, that's what being fully present in our singing in the moment is. It's not just about singing. It's not just about teaching and learning. That's lovely, and it's an exchange that's helpful and important. But it's then also seeing where it all carries us, and we never know that.
I love seeing and hearing the excitement in your body and your voice as you're talking about singing, and as you're talking about singing with people and exploring with people and hearing people explore and going places. And I'm wondering, so your song, Reciprocity, is born out of a place of heartache. And thinking about environmental damage and economic inequity and racism and political violence and wars, terrorism, weapons of mass destruction, disinformation, only a few of the great challenges of our time, right? There's a lot of heartbreak, loneliness, a lot of sense of not being in community. Talk to me about what you see that supports people to find the kind of energy and creativity and desire and hopefulness in a way that could actually shift things.
Okay, not a small question at all.
Not a small question. I'm going to just dive right in. Let's just go for it.
I my life has really been around music and about arts administration. So I have been working at the intersection of the arts and community and spirituality for really most of my life in one form or another. It doesn't always include singing. Singing has been a thread that's connected me from the beginning. I'm a lifelong musician and come from a family of musicians. And I really see these things as tools that we've forgotten about. So the arts, the humanities, religion or spirituality, however you frame the universe, right, that we can't explain, the mystery of the world that connects us, those things are the tools. And we've forgotten them. They've become things to look at or read or go to. They've become kind of transactional, right? Even our own singing forms have become forms of entertainment. And I actually despise the fact that everywhere I go in public, there's music playing. It just drives me batty because it's not being used as a powerful community building agent, right? As an agent of change. These things aren't just things to consume, right? And so because we've lost that, we've also then lost their power of connectivity to one another, right? These are tools that connect us to one another, right? And this is why community singing is so important to me, because that is what it is, right? It's about It's about actually many things at once. It's about connecting ourselves to what's deepest inside of us. It's about connecting us to that same quality in each other. It's about connecting us to each other. And it's about connecting us to that larger, I don't know what it is that connects us all. However you might name that holy thing, that sacred thing, right? But singing for me has always been the place that I find that. I find all three of those things. And we've lost so much of that in all of our creative endeavors. And there are many of us out there trying to build a bridge back to that, right? And Lawrence Cole, another songwriter, calls singing one of the oldest technologies of belonging. I love that. These things are technologies of belonging. They're technologies of connection. And they're so powerful because they have evolved into concert halls and performances. And I love performances. I'm not dissing on performances. Let's be very clear, right? But we have lost this idea that capacity lies within us. And we have moved into this place of not good enough. And this is really like how I backed into community singing 6 or 7 years ago now, when I faced a health crisis. And I had to really sit and discern, what does this mean for my creative life? If I can't make music the way I've been making it, then what can I do? And I had to really discern, what is the thing? What is the central thing about making music? What is the thing? And I realized that it was the moment after a performance or after a concert with my choirs or after church, right after a choir experience at church, when someone would come up to me and with tears in their eyes say, I didn't think I could sing, but today I did. Or they would share some horrible tale of musical wounding, which so many of us carry around, and then say, but I shed some of that today, and I sang, and it felt so good. And I realized that right there was why I did what I did. And then I started Googling. I'm like, okay, there have to be other people like this who are into kind of perfection-free, whatever. And this is how I found community singing. And it was just the most exciting thing ever. And I'm committed to it because I think it is a tool for how we grapple with the emotional trauma of living in these times, right? How can we do that? I don't think we can make any of those changes if we aren't carrying the connection that our creativity and our imagination and our spirituality bring for making us feel whole and making us feel connected.
The capacity that's built by being in connection. Yeah. Wow, you've opened up this wonderful, wonderful, colorful box of ideas, of threads that we could follow deeper. I'm wondering, to start with, if you can tell us a story about a particular time that you remember song, specifically your voice, shifting something in you.
Oh my goodness, there are so many. Actually, the thing that comes to me immediately, which not surprisingly is a connection, is an example of the things I'm talking about. I've been a lifelong musician. I'm actually a classically trained flutist who has sung her whole life, and so singing has always been a piece of that. And I've conducted many choirs. So in the early 2000s, I was artistic director of the Indianapolis Women's Chorus, which was a fabulous experience. And the chorus was a lesbian feminist chorus, and I found myself in Ohio at a festival and found this incredible ritual called a Winter Solstice Singing Ritual. It was a book published by Emerald Earth Publishing, and it seemed really fantastic. It was stories and songs, and there was a choir and drumming, and so I took this back to my congregation, and I said, I really think we should maybe do this here. This would be cool. It's a winter solstice ritual. Our church had a lot of really great musicians. They were excited about it. And so we pulled it together, And we held it in December of 2004. And everything magic happened in that space that I had never experienced at that level before. We had a choir of about 30 or 40 people, and we had a cellist playing with us, and we had 4 djembe players in the corners of the rooms. And the music is this rich array of chants and layer songs and storytelling and readers, and we set the room up in a circle, and there was a beautiful altar in the middle created by a professional artist. And, we didn't know what would happen. We put it out there and said, okay, community, we're going to do this thing. And we were mobbed. So the building, actually, the fire code said it would seat 250, and 400 people came. And we didn't know at the time that the fire code was 250, I should say. We crammed so many human beings into that space. And something happened, and we were not, it was not staged, right? So the choir was part of the circle. The choir was not like on a stage, we were all a thing. And there was tons of congregational singing. And the building just levitated. There was one song we sang, and we sang it so many times. And I was not willing to stop it because the crowd was just, they were consumed and uplifted, and their spirits were just raising the roof, literally, right, with their joy, with their energy, with their gratitude for the return of the sun and the season and what we had to do. I actually had to cut that song off by standing on a chair and jumping off of the chair because I could not get the crowd's attention in order to end the song. And it was just, when it was over, I'm like, what just happened here? And all 400 people had the same feeling. We were all, and we had a huge feast at the end of it, right? It was just, and everybody was spellbound by what we had just created together. And I was spellbound. And I'm like, oh my God, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is like this container that's some crazy blurred combination of ritual and performance, because it was both, right? If you only were coming to see a show, you got that. If you were coming for more than that, if you wanted to go deeper in that, you did. You could get up and dance in the circle. You could sing. You could whatever. And it was obvious that the community was so hungry for that. There was just huge hunger for that. And that really started for me like a whole, what is that, we're almost 20 years now. And that space is where I love to work. Is it ritual? Mm-hmm. Is it performance? Mm-hmm. Because we all are coming to that table differently. And some people are less comfortable with that, and they just want to sit and soak in, and that's okay, right? And other people want to get up and do an improv dance in the middle of it all.
So do you find that after the pandemic now, when that kind of put the kibosh on 400 people in a 250-person space, and things, of course, shifted, right? And people are finding ways to come together again, and there's it feels kind of raw and kind of new, and there's a lot of exploring going on about what does that look like now? What does ritual look like now? We've had our own very private rituals over the past 2 years, and now we're coming back into a public sphere. What are you bringing out of that time into what you're offering now? How is that changing what your interest is and what you feel there's a need for?
Yeah, such a good question. I don't know that it's changed what the container looks like, and people's accommodation for risk is different now. Mm-hmm. And I know during the pandemic, I wrote a lot of songs because there was time to do that since we couldn't really gather in the same way. And most of them were ritual kinds of songs, really. Now that we are moving back together, It so depends on the moment. Some people are ready for something really different. Like it's a time where we are both willing to risk in a new way, but also tentative as we step out. Mm-hmm. It's an energy I'm still feeling into, and I feel the same way. I know actually with the song Reciprocity, one of the really great things that happened with that song is that a member of my singing group, Song Squad, got into the Public Allies program and ended up working with the Indiana Forest Alliance. And so they started a campaign for our urban forests here in Indianapolis. And so she wanted to use the song Reciprocity for the campaign. So recently, 40 strangers just gathered in a park to learn the song spontaneously while being videotaped with a drone camera and all kinds of things. And they're going to be using that song for the next year as part of the Indie Urban Forest campaign in a promotional video. And the folks who showed up on a rainy, cold day on a Friday at 6 p.m. were like, why am I here? And what is going on? But they were curious and they loved trees. And they were looking for a different experience. And they were very skeptical about what was about to occur. And it was fabulous. It was wonderful. So that to me was just like a kind of an example of people having faith and going, well, I'm going to go to this thing because I like trees. And I don't really know what it is, and I'm not really a singer. But maybe it'll be interesting. And they were giving away tree seedlings at the time. So there was a little extra incentive. And it was both performance and ritual, right? We were performing for the camera in a big way, but this moment happened. We practiced it under like a gazebo so it would sound good. And then we went out under 4 of the most beautiful big trees and sang it. And the shape of it was completely different. And everybody then settled into it with the protection of the leaves over them, and the connection we built to one another by sounding together was really tangible. And so I don't know if I'm answering your question, but we did do our winter solstice ritual for the first time in 4 years, and we didn't get as many people as we usually do because people are still nervous about, or at least were at that time, nervous about congregating, especially in singing, which is just a big spit fest, basically. I think it's a really potent time to try new things. I recently had the honor of working with Lindsay Scott on a grief ritual that we did here in the city of Indianapolis, and it was a huge experimentation for both of us. And she's a very expert grief tender, and I wanted to bring improvisation into that mix. And 12 people took a risk, and none of us knew what was going to happen. And it was really quite miraculous what occurred that day. And also with the racial upheaval, I do a lot of work at the intersection of the arts, humanities, and racial injustice in my day job. And so it is a time where people are willing to be bolder to create change for the world, and that's taking all kinds of forms.
So I hear you talking about song being used as a technology in maybe targeted ways, and in places where people might not expect it, might not walk in thinking, "Oh, I'm an environmental activist," or "I'm not an environmental activist. I love trees, and I'm going to go do this thing about trees, and okay, I'm going to be singing, okay." And then dropping into a moment that's unexpected. The song can carry us, connect us in a way, and drop us into time and space in a way maybe that we can't, that is more challenging to get to without the music.
I absolutely believe that.
You mentioned writing during the pandemic, and writing because these other options weren't available to you now, and that your songs that were coming out were part ritual songs. And I'm wondering if you'd be willing to say whether you find yourself using song privately in any ritual form or non-ritual form, whether you use it privately as a technology for yourself.
Oh, absolutely. all the time, sometimes perhaps to the annoyance of those around me. A song also has a way, I forget to breathe. I don't know if anybody else does that, but like I get very tense and I carry a lot of tension in my shoulders, and then I find I'm breathing shallowly. I'm not connected, I'm not rooted, and I can feel all my energy and stress like just rising up. And I forget that I have roots, and I forget to drop into my breath. And so for me, singing is just like a really practical, and I suppose if I did meditation, it would do the same thing, right? There's another great technology. But for me, singing brings me back down into my center and connects me to my breath again.
So give me an example. Sing me the song. Tell me what happened and sing me the song that you sang.
So a lot of times what I do is I sing to myself from myself.
Yeah, me too.
So I will just like go, ah, you're okay, you're okay. You're okay, you're okay. You are whole, you are well. You are breathing in this moment. You are whole, you are well. You are breathing here. So that's like, I just sung that off the top of my cuff,
Absolutely.
right? Because actually your question made me tense. I'm like, oh no, I have to perform a thing I don't know. And so that's the kind of thing that I will do, right? And my staff actually is used to this. I've closed my door often because I'm like, I'm sorry, and the walls are paper thin. I'm like, I got to sing. And I'll do it before difficult meetings. I work in a sphere where I have to say challenging things to people in power. Mm-hmm. And I'm always terrified. so I do it anyway, but so that is often like as preparation for what I know is going to be difficult. It's I anchor there. So then I presence myself first with that as opposed to responding to it. And then I respond by taking a walk because I need to be among my people, which are the trees. Mm-hmm. So I need to be outside with what's rooted and what's blowing. As a response. So song for me is like oftentimes how I'll prep for something or if I'm nervous about something, right? Again, because it puts me in my body and in my breath, which is how I need to stay present, how I be present, right? For things that are difficult. And I won't say that I always remember to do that, but I often remember to do that when things are challenging. And also, you know, we're improvising all the time. We have a conversation and we're improvising. And so I'm a worrywart, man. I get stuck with these narratives in my head like, well, what's she going to say? Well, she's going to say this. And if she says this, then I should respond that way. And then I have this ready and I have this ready. And so before you know it, you're writing out a narrative that you don't even know will really happen. And so I got to bring back, you're fine where you are. And you can breathe into the moment and give the moment what's needed in the moment and what needs to be said in the moment in a good way, in a beautiful way, in a way that builds a connection, not division. At least that's my attempt.
I noticed coming out of the pandemic that, you know, during the pandemic, a lot of my interactions were in Facebook or on email. And there, I do a lot of editing, I realized. You know, so I have a chance to respond and then, oh yeah, well, that's not really what I want to say. Go back, delete it, respond again, delete that, try one more time, and okay, and then send it out. And then when you're in real person conversation interactions, it's a little harder to go, wait, I take that back. Now I'm going to restart. You can't erase things. And so there's a different pacing, a different awareness. And I'm realizing, of course, with these podcasts, I write out a script and I put out a set of questions. These are things that I might come to. But then I also want to follow the conversation and the energy and the questions. And so I end up throwing out to somebody like you a question that's not on the script anywhere and that you bravely took up and went with. But the skill of improvising, of trusting ourselves, of recognizing when we're not dropped in, being able to recognize the feeling of, oh, wait a second, I've lost connection to myself. And let me just quick take a breath, re-find it, and then respond. that skill is one that Rhiannon, for example, works on intentionally developing. It's a craft. It's a learnable thing. It's like addition. It's something you can learn how to do. You don't have to come knowing how to do it from the get-go. Yeah. How do you take care of yourself besides singing, not meditating? I heard. And walking.
Walking is huge for me. I try to walk at least an hour a day. I'll be honest with you, I'm not the greatest at self-care. I mean, that is like, I'm 62. I should know how to do that. I still struggle to do that. I'm still often very trapped in a mindset of evaluating my life according to productivity. Was I productive today? Did I get something done today? And the language that goes with, I didn't do anything today. I was worthless. Right? And so I have a lifelong struggle with rest and care. And honestly, I think singing and walking have probably saved my life. But I don't do enough of that. Even with the music and the singing, I tend to, more things to do, more things to, So I'm still learning how to take good care of myself. I'm lucky to be partnered to a wonderful man for over 40 years who is a trained chef. And so eating good, delicious, healthful food is one way that we share together. And we both cook, of what that means. And growing food, he's really the one who grows it, but I enjoy the benefits. Now, self-care is really... I'm really contemplating what that looks like in the last third of my life, right? Yeah. As I contemplate, what does it mean to leave an arts administration career of 40 plus years that's been high octane? Can I let go of that identity, and what does that mean? What does that mean for my music making? What does that mean for my relationships? What does that mean for where I choose to be and how I choose to be? These are all like really fresh and open questions right now. I have not a lot of answers. And actually, ironically, as I'm really looking at this, like, how do I move music, which has been a rich side gig, to more to the center of my life? And how do I do that? But what that has actually manifested in is like a ton of stuff to do. And so there I am again, right? And I've got a very demanding full-time job, and I've taken on all these incredible artistic and musical things in the last 9 months that are huge and rich, but of course they've added to the time. And then I have parents who are aging and who require more energy. And actually I just returned from seeing my dad, who's recently had a couple of strokes and no longer has language and doesn't really know who I am anymore. Sorry. And music is something that we share. It was the major connector for us in many ways. And so now I'm just really feeling that and feeling into the importance of the relationships, right? And I'm quite certain I haven't valued or centered relationships as much as I should have in my life. So I'm trying to think about and I've been wrestling with for a decade, right? Ever since reading Adrienne Marie Brown's book about emergent strategy and, thinking about how transactional our living is and how it needs to be relationship centered. So I've find myself moving toward that, and that's what's nourishing. When our lives are centered around relationship, then the nourishment that comes with that is what we need. Yeah. And so I'm still, it's like a barge that turns slowly, right? I'm still unshackling myself from what our culture tells us is the way to live and to be productive, and capitalistic centric mindsets and all these things that I'm trying to rid myself of, which will, I think, create self-care and nourishment automatically if I can do that.
And at the same time, kind of putting all of that in a barrel and saying, well, this was bad, is part of that system of judging things and closing them out and lumping them together. It's hard to hold the complexity of the beautiful things that you experienced and the ways that you grew through your demanding job and the parts that you want to release, the parts that aren't feeding you, aren't nurturing you. But you're not ready to completely leave that job yet. And so you're talking about transformation from within and bringing something else into the center when the center is already full, I hear.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Do you have any other questions that are big that you're carrying right now? I hear that self-care question and that combination. I hear so many big questions.
They are big. I think a question that I really am carrying forward, again, as I'm thinking about what the last part of my life looks like, is being close to physically and emotionally to my family. I grew up in a family that lived from coast to coast, and none of us had money, and I have many relatives I barely knew. Mm-hmm. And my husband's family is all rooted here, and I have so admired that. And so my kids are grown and moved to Chicago. And so I'm thinking a lot about, well, what is my, how am I literally close to my children emotionally mm-hmm. and physically, mm-hmm. And with my dad ailing, I'm thinking a lot about who's caring for me when I'm old, and will these, mm-hmm. I'm so aware of how poorly we treat our seniors mm-hmm. and our elders, and what does that look like for me and for Eric, and what will it be to be alone without my husband when that time comes, as I'm watching my dad's wife grapple with her life without him after many decades. So these are all questions that are haunting me, but also, here we go back to productive. What can I do? What's left with my time? How do I want to use the precious energy that I have? Yeah. And I have another health crisis on the front that I'm not really sure about right now. Mm. And so I'm really like, well, I gotta use the time I have to make as much beauty in the world as I can, right? Yeah. With the time that I have. So I think every moment, every hour, every day for me is like waffling between these two. Yeah. Like, I need to rest, and but I have so much more good things to come out of me. And I think creative people do.
And it's so challenging because relationships, for example, beautiful moments in relationships don't get documented. I mean, I guess unless you've got your selfie phone out, chunk. But generally, those aren't the moments that are documented in a way that you can look and you can say, oh, look, I made this album, I did this video, I've got these concert programs that are, I helped see this project through. But relationship building, close, intentional relationships, which always ebb and flow and flux and shift as people shift. Mm-hmm. It's hard to look at those with the doing look.
Right.
And say, oh, I did that relationship.
Exactly.
Right.
And yet what you're speaking about is making me remember visiting my dad recently, and he doesn't have language now, and he's lived far away for most of my life. And it was hard to not be able to communicate with him. And he's a writer, so words and language are mm-hmm. powerful things. And I'm pretty certain he didn't know who I was. Mm-hmm. However, I'm feeling very peaceful because at some point when we were visiting, he pointed to his heart and he pointed to my heart. Oh. And he went back and forth, pointing to my heart, pointing to his heart, pointing to my heart, pointing to his heart, pointing just back and forth. And I'm like, okay, we still know each other there, right? And so we still have a grasp of the essence of one another and of how we are connected to each other. And I said to him, yes, Dad, you are always like right there. You are always right there, and I'm always right there. And I have no idea if he understood me. But, when I flew back to Indianapolis, and this was just a couple days ago, I knew when we flew down there that he might not know who I was. I didn't know if he would know. And I have a lot of peace now coming back, knowing that even without language, even without whatever, that we're there. Yeah. His heart, my heart, and he feels that. Yeah. And so do I. That has brought me so much peace in the last few days, and with whatever is coming for both of us. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was everything. It was everything.
That just teared me up. That's a beautiful, beautiful story. Yeah. Wow. So we've gone from environmental degradation and restoration, possibly, to aging and relationships with trees, relationships with people, threads, connections. What a rich conversation. You did this conversation really well. I think you could check this off.
Oh, thank you. It's the improv training, I'm telling you.
So we're going to go into the lightning round questions.
Okay.
So these are quick. Well, I bet you can guess what a lightning round question is. So what's an album that was really important to you?
This is slightly crazy, but it's an ancient album from the 60s, a Peter, Paul, and Mary album, because my mother played it incessantly while I was growing up, and I know it's where I learned to sing harmony.
Which one?
Oh, I can't even remember which one.
Can you name some of the songs that were on it?
Oh, yes. Hushabye, Don't You Cry. Puff the Magic Dragon, all the old things, right, from the 60s. Then there was a Judgment Day was one my family, my brother and mom and I always sang together. And so 3-part harmony. So it mirrored. We would listen to Peter, Paul, and Mary and then sing Peter, Paul, and Mary in 3-part.
So cool. What is your favorite soup?
Oh, split pea with ham, no question.
Okay, you and my husband. All right. What is a sound you feel strongly about? Doesn't have to be a beautiful sound, or it could be, but just a sound that you react strongly to.
So this will be no surprise, but the sound of leaves on trees. And so I've actually made it my walking practice to listen to the difference between the types of trees and the different sounds that their leaves make in the wind.
So I can think right off the top of my head of poplar, the way poplar sounds, and the way that maples sound, and how those are different, and the way that beeches sound and how those are different. But are there other trees that stand out for you in sound quality?
Yeah, the tulip tree in Indiana, which is our state tree, has such a large leaf structure, and they just have a completely different quality of sound. We have lots of maples in the neighborhood, and there's just a handful of tulip trees, and they just make a very distinctive, fabulous sound.
Cool. Who is an artist you wish more people listened to?
Lindsay Scott. She is phenomenal and a priestess of song, and an amazing human being and ritualist. And her some songwriters cast spells with their music, and she is definitely one of them.
So she is episode 69 and 70. Her interview episode is episode 70 on this podcast if you want to catch a listen. I absolutely agree with you. And there'll be a link in the show notes to all of these things. But before we close, where can we find you, follow your projects, buy your music? What are you excited about right now?
You could find out more about my work, songsquadindie.com, and also PamBlevinsHinkle.com. But I will have to say, I stink at keeping my websites up to date. I'll get to that, but it's not been a priority. And I've written a ton of music that's nowhere online. And people can be free to email me also at pbhinkle@gmail.com. And I haven't sold any of my music. I haven't gotten there, and I usually give most of my stuff away or by donation, or I just have for so long felt like the music comes through me, not from me, and it didn't seem right to charge people. So I'm happy to share.
And you had another full-time occupation that was presumably a source of income.
Exactly. I've had the privilege of doing that, and now maybe that I'm, will contemplate a different future. I think it's important. One of the things I really don't, I want to have a relationship with people. So I'm really more interested in, here's my music. Tell me what you're going to do with it. Where are you going to sing it? Who's it, who is it for? How is it received? I'm really interested in that. That's my payment.
Beautiful. A huge thank you to you, Pam, for coming on A Breath of Song. And a huge thank you to you, our listeners. I'm so glad you're singing with us. Visit abreathofsong.com to see the show notes, all those show notes that I was just saying, with links, lyrics, Patty Pietrowski's glorious artwork. Sign up to get artwork and music in your mailbox. How beautiful is that? Be one of the generous people who leaves something in the gratitude jar to help cover costs. Before Patty or I is paid, we're not paid very much, I have to admit. But before that happens, 25% is donated to the Jazz Foundation of America, which directly supports jazz, blues, and roots musicians in need. The skill and the artistry of these musicians has directly shaped much of the music, if not most of the music that I share on this podcast, yet historically they have been inadequately recognized and unfairly recompensed. This is a small step toward restoration that we can take together. With songs that come out of the 60s, out of Peter, Paul, and Mary, so much of that was heavily, heavily influenced by African-American musicians.
Yes.
Yeah. Let's sing Reciprocity again to help it sink in more deeply.
I breathe for the trees and they breathe for me. I breathe for the trees and they breathe for me. I breathe for the trees and they breathe for me. I breathe for the trees and they breathe for me. I breathe for the trees and they breathe for me. I breathe for the trees and they breathe for me. I breathe for the trees and they breathe for me. I breathe for the trees and they breathe for me. I breathe for the trees and they breathe for each other. I breathe for the moments and they breathe for me. I breathe in the moments and reaching for each other. I breathe for the moments and reaching for the dream. I breathe for the moments and reaching for each other. I breathe for the moments and reaching for the dream. I breathe for the moments and reaching for each other. I breathe for the moments and reaching for the dream. I breathe for the moments and reaching for each other. I breathe for the moments and reaching for the dream. I breathe for the moments and reaching for each other. I breathe for the moments and reaching for the dream. I breathe for the moments and reaching for each other. I breathe for the moments and reaching for the dream. I breathe for the moments and reaching for each other. I breathe for the moments and reaching for the dream. I breathe in the moment and reaching for each other. Rooted in the moment and reaching for the dream. Rooted in the moment and reaching for each other. Rooted in the moment and reaching for the dream. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out.
Pam, thank you so much for coming today.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, listeners and singers, for joining Pam and me today for A Breath of Song. I'm grateful that you're taking care of yourself and listening to your voice. I believe making a better world starts with tuning into ourselves and each other, which is what we just did, like the trees. So yay us!
All right.
If you're liking this podcast, please share with a friend, and next time we'll plant another song. Until then, be well.